everybody. Welcome back to Writing the Rapids, the show where I, Joe Bielecki, talk to writers about writing. Very often those writers have been recommended to me by writers who have previously been on the show. This episode, we have a Rejoinder with John Trefry, who is here to talk about his forthcoming book, Massive. John Trefry has been on the show twice before, in 2018 to talk about Platts and the Inside the Castle Press project, and in 2021 to talk about experimental writing with Mike Klein and Mike Correo. More information about Inside the Castle, the press, and John the person can be found at insidethecastle.org. If you want to help out this show financially, you can do so in 3 ways. PayPal.me/NoisemakerJoe. You can just toss me money one time. If you want to be a recurring helper, a patron, let's say, Patreon.com/NoisemakerJoe. We got a lot of big plans coming in this year, and now's a good time to get on the train. Choo choo. Or you can buy my book. It's called Tired, and it's on Amazon, and I think it's pretty darn good. If you don't want to help out the show financially, but you do want to help the show out, you can do so by tweeting about the show or whatever social media platform is your most followed. You can rate the show the appropriate number of stars on whatever podcatcher you use, and you can just listen all the way to the end of the episode. That helps the algorithm gods as well. Now, that's enough of me asking you to do things for me. Here's me doing a thing for you. It's my conversation with John. We talked for the first time in 2018, and then you came on again for the Roundtable episode, which is one of the more successful episodes that we've done.
No shit.
Which was, I feel like it was in 2021, but I cannot see it on the. Yes, it was February 2021.
Definitely in pandemic life. I do remember that.
Yeah. And that was. We discussed the problems with the term experimental writing, and
I think I'm over that, by the way.
Oh yeah? Okay, let's talk about that.
I just don't care.
Okay. So
I've spent kind of the last year like maybe checking out like of stuff, not checking into things, but just trying to just give myself some space in my life. So I don't really have a lot of concerns about what anybody's saying or doing. Maybe
Good.
in a bad way.
Yeah.
I don't think it makes me very community oriented, but I've just tried to get some space.
Sure. I think longtime listeners of this show will know that I'm a community skeptic. I'm not certain that that's a concept we need to really worry about too much. I think it's okay for some people. Like I get why certain groups of people might want it. But like I think putting too much emphasis on it really distracts from like what it is we're doing, right? Like
I do try to do that. I think it's more that I never really felt, and I don't know if other people online feel like they're part of a community, but I never really felt like I was part of a community. Whatever that means. Like I have friends in real life who live in my town. And it's very different than like some stranger online. I always felt like I was just observing, and the kind of passive observer role feels really powerless and frustrating. And I think that's just the whole ecosystem of Twitter is just feeling passive and frustrated and lashing out. And yeah, it was not helpful for me, and it's not helpful for looking inside the castle and trying to think about what its position or role in any kind of larger community was. So it's been helpful to just pull back more and try to not even to pull back and focus hardcore on working, but to pull back and focus on my life and my family and things like that.
Yeah. So you sent me some materials for Massive, and you've been talking about Massive for quite a while. I've seen.
Yeah, sorry.
It's totally fine. I think Mike Correo a while back did a review of like part of it that's available, and I know you've posted it around places and maybe talked to other people. And I'll confess I haven't been keeping up with it super well. But you sent me a fun little pamphlet that has sections from it. You described it as a roadmap for how the book's going to be laid out. And
yeah, is that what it says in the pamphlet?
It says, well, that's what you said in the DMs. The pamphlet says,
oh, okay.
There's
I don't have it anymore because I sent you my copy.
Yeah, and I'm glad you did, because there are notes where it's like bold is this person and italics is this person. So I wish I had like really kind of looked at that before I started trying to read the text, because it's deceiving. It looks simpler than it is, and I think that's why I was thinking about experimental literature. One of the things, I don't think we said it in the roundtable, but I think maybe on like Wake Island Pod a couple months later, somebody said, we're talking about how like experiments are, I'm going to try to do this and we're going to see what happens.
Yeah.
And your books kind of feel like that, where like when you came on the first time and we're talking about plats and you're like, this is how it's laid out, which is not something I picked up on while reading it. And I think I was like halfway through it at the time. So the latter half of the book, after listening to you talk about it, was a bit easier to kind of work my way through. And I'll be the first person to mention that I'm really bad at reading this type of thing. Like I feel, and maybe you're supposed to feel lost or what, but like there's this I don't know, non-formalist prose that for some reason feels much harder to grasp than just like poetry. I don't know. It's something I'm probably going to spend the next couple of years trying to illustrate with my words, but like reading the F text felt a lot more comfortable than reading this or Platts or I don't know, one of Correo's works. Like I've read enough Mike Klein to sort of like be able to relax into the like, okay, it's airy and ethereal, and we're gonna just kind of grab where we can grab and whatever. I've mentioned before, one of my professors in like one of my earliest writing classes in college talked about how poetry is not a riddle to be solved. And that was really easy to take. That was really easy to grasp. And I think I've taken it beyond that, where like I get, I don't know, I don't want to say annoyed because it's not super fair, but when people are like, House of Leaves solved in a YouTube video, I'm just like, do we need to solve it though? Like, it's just a spooky house, guys. Like, it makes people go crazy. Like, what? Like, I know that there's layers to it. There's stuff with mazes and minotaurs and whatever. But like, to enjoy something, you only need to let yourself enjoy it on its own terms. But this, like, I'm doing that, and then I'm like, oh, you know what? This is divided into columns on purpose. What if I read down the columns? Oh, it makes sense now. Like, I'm still like learning the rules of of the text. People, when the book comes out, when Massive comes out, people will see what I'm talking about. But if I can describe what's on the page, there's words. It's not always justified, but you can kind of see every once in a while there is a clear gap in the text that it almost looks like a justification just anomaly where it's like, oh look, that space lines up all the way down the page. But if you treat it like columns and you read down the columns, and it starts to make more sense. And the notes that you put in were, the italics are one person, and underline is another person, and bold is another person, and
I don't think I'm going to do that.
Okay, that's fine.
That was notes after the fact of trying to think about how to organize the reading experience, but the pamphlet was not constructed that way. It was just like a really improvisational kind of let's see what this looks like, and didn't have, and so one of my shortcomings is trying to develop processes for everything. So I was trying to develop a process that would remove the improvisational aspect of it for formatting and text styles and things like that. I would describe what you're saying with the columns. That is correct. It's meant to be a 3-column page, but I describe it as text wrap of text. So you have text blocks, and then you have other text that's text wrapping around text blocks. So sometimes a piece of text will be wider than 2 columns. Sometimes it'll be all 3 columns, with the goal of you being able to read across a line, even if it goes between 3 separate texts, or to read in a little column or a plat or whatever you want to call it, or to just glance at a part of the page and read that. And part of the idea and why it's taking so long is that because my expectation is that you would not read it all. And I think the pamphlet form is different because it's whatever 30 pages. The expectation is that you read every word. If it's 800 pages of that, the expectation is that you just don't read it all. You wouldn't read it all. And so the format there it's based on some other kind of conceptual constraints that started before the project started. Like you said, give yourself an experiment. That there was that kind of hypothesis or roadmap, as you described it, set out, and that kind of gave birth to that type of layout where there's lots of different texts on one page that can be read piece by piece, can be read smoothed together, or can be not read, or could be stared at. It's kind of like a much more bludgeoning approach than Platt's, where Platt's was like a rhythmic 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. This is just noise. Everything's stitched together.
Yeah, it's a more sort of brutalist smut maker, sort of. And
it's not going to be in color.
No, it's not. in good. That would be so expensive. That would just be too expensive.
Yeah.
But yeah, I find myself always just kind of being excited by new ideas. So like, I like the idea of having all these voices sort of like collapsed on each other, and it feels, it's like living in a big city, and there's all these lives happening, and like, how would you, how would you tell that like simultaneous story from like a very far back space? An interesting thing, like, it's an interesting question of like, how do you tell this super grand story? And I'm currently listening to the audiobooks of the Horus Heresy, the Warhammer 40k overarching. There's like 60 books in the series, and I'm on the fourth one, and I noticed that like chronologically it like sets it back several months from the end of the third book, so that you can go to a completely different place and see different characters. And as we like approach the end of the third book chronologically, you start to see overlaps. Like, it's the same battle, and you're seeing kind of like, oh, over there, that's where stuff was happening in book 3, but we're in this book now. And like, when you're telling a war story that spans hundreds of years and planet-wide conflicts, that like, you kind of have to do that. And that for like fantasy books will do that. You'll get a big 1,000-page fantasy book, and each chapter is a different group of people, so you're kind of telling that. And this is what that makes me feel like. It's just like, well, what happens if you smush it all together and try to make it I don't know, efficient for space, but if it's going to be, an 800-page book, then that defeats the purpose. But
I would say the scope is probably similar. It did not start out that way, but I started this book with the idea of it being something I could finish in like a year and a half, because my other books had both taken 7 or 8 years, and now I'm in year 6 or 7 of this. So kind of expanded into something with a scope more like what you're talking about. But somewhere in the early stages of it basically all started with reading a Joseph Brodsky essay about Osip Mandelstam and Anna Akhmatova and their whole kind of relationship, and Mandelstam's wife and other poets of the time. And I don't know, just thinking, hey, that's kind of an interesting story of all these people together in Russia. And so I did a lot of reading of Mandelstam and Akhmatova and Mandelstam's wife, Nadezhda, and somehow a variety of conceptual things arose out of that. And one of the, and I don't even know where, but one of the most kind of formative things was the concept of block time or eternalism, which is like the notion that there's not linear time. It's that all events exist simultaneously, and that, I mean, you can say all sorts of things about entropy, and I don't even know. I'm not a physicist, but so I took the concept of that block time and tried to start applying it to the prose, and then also the reading experience. So the reading experience is one where everything is happening simultaneously and can be read in an infinite number of ways, because you can access different events without having to proceed through other events to get to them. But also then the prose has kind of given me a fun project of writing everything in present tense. And so, like, I can't remember which species of present tense it is, like present continuous or something like that, um, where everything has to be ing.
Mm.
Um, so, like, any word that I use cannot be a past tense verb. Um, any noun that I use generally cannot be something that looks like a non-present tense continuous word. So, like, paint
Mm.
is a verb. Um, so you can't say there's paint on the wall. You would have to say there's pigmentation,
Mm.
or either that or you write about someone painting the wall, even though it might not be happening at that time. If you say the red, you might say someone is painting the room red, and then there's also someone living in that room,
Mm.
which might be happening at a different time. So it's kind of just given me a widening project to enjoy, of wordplay, of trying to find workarounds for that language constraint. And it's also driven me super into lots of jargon that um, would not be misconstrued as a verb that's not present tense, because it's so specific and it never gets used outside of the context of being a noun. Um, so yeah, that has driven basically all of the conceptual stuff, and then the rest of it is more scopic, like you're saying, of like building world building. Well, let's just call it world building. I'm not fucking around with terms anymore. It's just world building and trying to create my own version of Stalinist Russia, um, with this entity called the ADA, which is a play off of Nabokov's book. Um, and there's this figure called the Demon, and then there's a Stalinist figure whose name is Alpinist. And then, there's just so many different things going on. And then I developed this little kind of system of these text buckets, where I open up a Microsoft Notepad file and give it a name that's based on, just bouncing and riffing off of these things from my original readings for the book from Mandelstam, and then his fascination with Dante, his relationship with different lovers in his life who are also poets in their lives, and um, things associated with Russian history that I found interesting, like drilling the deepest borehole into the earth, and then the legends of it, like unleashing a satanic force. And I don't know, it's been a very liberating project because I feel like I can write anything that I want and it doesn't matter. And I've just felt so liberated by that, because my other two books were so I just felt like I was taking them really seriously. Like, I need to write something serious. And at the same time, I was writing The IDK, which was not serious. It was just absurd nonsense from the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like this book is much more like that, where I can type out a list of all the Emmanuel movies, and that fits in there. Why not? Yeah, that goes in there. Or I can write an fake article about head cheese recipes, or what have you. That it all seems to just belong in this smear together.
Yeah, I I'm a fan of that. One of the things that, particularly about Twin Peaks, which the more I learn about it, the more I know that Lynch didn't have as much to do with it as one might want to imagine. But I love how his worlds are kind of like that, where he just like has an idea and he's like, yeah, I want to put that in there, so we're gonna make it work. We're gonna make it connect.
Yeah.
And I feel like that sort of freedom is so good at making an artist be unique, appear unique, because like your brain just will pull things from somewhere, and it's not going to be like somebody else, right? So you don't even have to like work that hard to be original. You just have to like follow where the ideas are coming from.
Yeah, I'm just writing my interests. I mean, stuff in these people's lives that I'm not interested in. I'm not trying to do like a biography. I just needed an armature to write on. So yeah, I'm just writing about the things that make me feel like writing.
Yeah.
So it's not challenging to sit down and do something, because it's like, why wouldn't I want to write about I don't know, Rachel White Reed sculpture, or Stalinist skyscrapers, or the most prolific executioner in history. I mean, all of these things are just things that are like, wow, this is really fascinating. I'll just write 1,000 words about it.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm making the book into a joke, or sound like just like like there's no purpose to it. But I mean, in the end, I feel like you should just enjoy what you're writing, and no book should appear to have any more purpose than any other book. I just want to finish it.
Yeah, I think that in an art class I had in middle school, we were talking about doing like cartoons, and she said it's not careless line work, it's carefree line work. And I think maybe that's kind of what you're getting at, where it's not, I gotta sit down and write this super gritty gray picture, the first third of Stalker sort of Russia story, so that everybody knows how bad living in Stalinist Russia was, because they didn't know. There's not enough evidence already, or whatever, right? And like, I love that type of stuff. I'm not trying to put it down, but it can be limiting to the imagination to do that, to try to laser focus on one thing and really nail it down.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's my frustration with fiction in general, is that it's not, it rarely is fictional. It's like, there's such an interest in verisimilitude and truth or whatever. Like, why would you care? Like, the fact that I'm writing about Joe D'Amato movies, or like strip malls, or whatever, those things are not part of Stalinist Russia. I feel like people who write fiction could benefit from some liberation, and not feeling like they're indebted or indentured to depicting reality in some way, because it's fiction. I mean, like, why do it if you're not going to be fascinated by it? If you just want to be like this really precise puppet master, I just don't understand that mentality.